click in and, hold on, this is not
Was that the
all
form you
here.
sent
I
out?
just sent this from today, okay, yeah. So if you click in on that, you can erase my assessment method and put your own in. That's just an example, to give you an idea what to put in. And it's got the little drop-down menu for assessment method. And I'm about to, this is my first time ever making a fillable form, so it took me a while. I'm going to make one also for the results. So we'll be, once you get your actual results, there'll be a form. It's a fillable PDF, which I had no experience whatsoever filling out. I'm interested.
And let me just actually sort of emphasize what you're saying there. The sample that is in here, the information, is really helpful. I had thought when I was thinking about what data to put in there, I was going to do it very differently, and I was going to be putting in much too much detail as opposed to a summary. You know, the percentage that got the final result. I was going to put in like all the information. It turned out from looking at the sample that I was going to be doing way too much. So make sure you take your cues from the sample.
So within, by next week, I'll have the one for when you put your results in. So there'll be one just like this, but it'll be for you when you put your results in. This would make it much easier either for you or for the secretary. Whoever fills in track data, it's just kind of nice, it's all organized. So it'll be really easy once you get on track data. It's just easy. So, or if you're giving it to the secretary, they don't have to guess so much. Nobody likes to guess. I just also want to remind people in that email that I sent out, there are things that we were supposed to have started. I'm a mean teacher. On Flex Day, we had a list of things to be completed. I also sent this out again in my email today, just to remind people we're trying to keep on track about just identifying what courses you're going to be assessing this year, who's going to be responsible for them, make sure that your PEP matrix, the course versus program, that's all online. So just you see that coming today in your email, don't just delete it. Look at that. Okay. So I think you're hoping more of this is going to be discussion and not be so much talking. And eating brownies. Don't let me come home with brownies tonight. So one thing we've been doing a lot of kind of discussion just in talking about why are we assessing, and one thing I keep getting a question is how often should I assess? And you gotta remember that this is really the point of assessment is to identify areas in your instruction that aren't working and areas that are working well. So when you look at your assessment results, that should point out areas where you can improve your teaching. So let's say you see something that needs improvement, you're going to get a plan in place. Hopefully you'll talk to the other faculty in your discipline, come up with a plan, implement that plan the next time you teach that course, and then you might want to reassess. So your schedule of assessment really depends on what you find out from your results. So it's not like there's a set we all have to assess every single semester. It depends. And then there were other questions like, at Flexi this came up, should you assess all the sections of a course? It kind of depends. If you're teaching 4 sections yourself, that may not be the most beneficial use of your time and information. I have 100 students. I am actually going to assess all 100 students, but maybe I don't need to. But if you have 3 different faculty all teaching the same course, maybe that would be very useful to see, is everybody on the same page? Are we all getting the same kind of results? Is there anybody who might need help or anybody who could share how come their assessment results were really good in one area? Maybe they could share their teaching methods with you. So it depends on what you want to get out of it. Think about what you want out of your assessment.
Are all programs using the same assessment in each section of every course?
You should.
Yes. Because that's a change.
We were always told over biology that we wanted them all the same. So we have the same assessment. We've always done the same assessment. So if 3 people are teaching anatomy, they all have the same assessment. Are we doing that?
Can I kind of break in on that one too? Like for the speech department for public speaking, we developed a rubric together of in terms of a well-developed, delivered, persuasive speech. So all the instructors are using the same rubric, but the assignment that they're using it on, the persuasive assignment itself, is going to be slightly different.
And your grading could be different. So the rubric, you might all decide what a 3 has these characteristics, but it doesn't mean that you have to give 3 points. You might weight that differently for your grades. Your grades are different than your assessment. So everybody agrees on what a 3 is in the rubric, but you might think that the presentation is really important, so I give 7 points for my presentation. Somebody else might think the content's really important, so they give more points for the, so points versus
So,
rubric.
so the college is asking that all instructors use the same assessment rubric or
That's what I've always
technique.
been told.
Well, given the way that the data is put in there, I mean, it's like for this course and this SLO in this course, what methods are you using to, and then you have to have a sample, so you're kind of doing it for the course, not for individual instructors teaching it.
Yeah, it'll be part of it.
But I think also just looking forward in terms of the second iteration, if I have some real issues in my class that I'm not getting the content or the skills, and you are, then on the next iteration, I might assess on my own in order to address
Right.
the issues that I have.
Right. Yes, so that's true. You can always do more.
Sorry, one more. So how are we supporting adjunct participation in that without just handing them, use this to assess your students?
It's a really good
And
question.
not requiring that they work for free to sign
No,
these.
and this is, I have to say, this is probably where I've had the hardest time, but this is going to my own personal thing, is I first approach, let's say there's one person is a part-time, it's an adjunct, and one person is a full-time. In our department, our full-time has taken over and work with the adjunct, but just as much as they would like to work. So basically saying, we're going to do assessment, do you have any questions you'd like to put into the assessment, talk about assessment? Or, and then maybe that faculty has some good input, but the full-time faculty is going to be the one responsible for making up that assessment. It might be
And saying, this is what
we're going to do
to assess.
to assess. And you can get the input from the adjunct faculty, but not put the responsibility on the adjunct faculty.
Okay.
One thing is you're not telling that adjunct faculty how that is going to reflect the student's grade. So let's say you say somehow this has to enter into your assessment, whether or not it's an in-class quiz or as part of they put it into their exam, however they want to do, that is fine, but they're all the same assessment questions. And a full-timer really has to step up to the plate and be the one to organize it. The hard part is if it's only an adjunct teaching that class, there are no full-time faculty.
Yeah.
Then a full-time faculty has to piggyback on there and help them. And maybe I had to do this for one class where 2 adjuncts were teaching it. There was no full-time instructor, and those 2 adjuncts had to come agree on the assessment, and they couldn't agree. So I made the assessment, gave it to them, and said, you can do this as an in-class quiz, you can do it as a non-graded, whatever you want to do with it is for grades, but you have to give this assessment. And then they gave me the data back. So in the end, the full-timers have to really just take the lead.
We have a different problem in modern languages, I think, than in some of the other areas. Now, certainly, I don't teach all of the levels of English, but I could go in and kind of work something out if I had to, if I just had part-timers. When you have a modern language coordinator that speaks Spanish or teaches Spanish, and then she has to work with someone who does French and she doesn't speak French or Italian, now what do you do? And these people teach one class and they come in at night.
This is really hard. We have this with, for instance, ecology. And no full-timer teaches ecology or wildlife, and they're taught at night. And so I've had email conversations with them saying, this is the SLO, do you have any, how are you assessing this right now in any way? And usually these are your core competencies, so hopefully they are being assessed. And they'll send me, yes, I'm doing, these are questions in my test that address this. And then I'll say, well, I'll work with them that way, often over email, because they come in at night. And I'm not going to be an expert in their field. So, and actually we've gotten feedback from the part-timers who said, that SLO, we don't actually cover that. And then we'll look at the course content and say, you're right, if we tweak this a little bit, you're right, this was not a good SLO for this class. We've never taught that class before. And so you work with the adjunct person to make sure that the SLO is a good SLO, and then work with them to, usually they've already, I'm guessing that somehow in their course that they are assessing that SLO. Just like they figure out how to identify in what way they are assessing it. It's your core competency in that class. So hopefully that French teacher will be assessing, writing a paragraph in French. Well, I have no idea what the SLO is. But they better be in some way doing that, and if they're not, there's a problem. So you're just helping the person identify what assessment methods they're already using in place to assess that SLO. You're helping them.
This is is asking an awful lot of part-timers.
I know.
Took a 5% pay cut that we've
I
never,
know.
we're fighting to get back, but we probably won't.
So the one thing I would first do is make sure all courses that are taught by full-timers are assessed first, and then work on the part-timers. That's what we did in biology. All of the full-timers assess theirs. You learn a lot from your assessment about how to do it easily, and then you help the part-timers. And so when we actually, in biology, we're now down to that, when we're only doing it with adjuncts, because we've done all the full-timers, and now we're working on the adjuncts. And I totally agree with you. It is, so the more you can help them, the better. And actually, that might be a good brown bag little lunch discussion, would be sitting down and finding ways that we can help the adjuncts.
Well, absolutely, and especially in areas where your adjuncts aren't getting paid for any office hours.
No, I wonder if, I mean, maybe we should brainstorm on what incentives could we give to adjuncts for doing SLO assessment.
Well, I think this falls on the institution
Yeah.
to pony it up.
Yeah.
Well, we're asking an awful lot of them.
Yeah, and for less pay.
I think it would be something for us to go to our president about passing an opinion forward, because even, if we weren't like helping the adjunct, but essentially we're saying, you do the extra work, or we'll do it for you and tell you what to do.
Right.
And if they do the work, then we're asking them to work for free with pay cut.
Yeah.
Which just, it seems ethically wrong.
Yeah. I think there's a discussion that we
It
really
is
should have.
ethically wrong.
Right? You'll see about it,
That's
Janet,
why it
just
seems that way. Okay. Okay, so this was a little assess, review your data, figure out what can be improved, develop a plan to improve it, reassess, review the data, and keep this as, we're never done with assessment.
And do you have the sample from track, I also did Donna, well, no, maybe we
Yeah,
don't get to that right now, but your plan can be pretty, in terms of what you put into track data,
Yeah.
that can be pretty, basic, look at those questions again, see if the questions.
Yeah, and it was something like, when you're developing a plan, it might be getting down with other faculty and seeing, what's my assessment method, was it a clearly stated assessment, say, question. Talk to the faculty about ways to improve your instruction. If it was a good assessment method, and yet only 40% of your students got it, you're thinking, this was my core competency, only 40% of the students at the end of the year could do this. There's only so much you can actually blame the students on that. So at some time you have to start wondering about your teaching method.
And again, a piece of that in reviewing the data and then having your plan and reassessing, like in public speaking, we had to assess critical listening. How do you, see that people develop critical listening skills? And we realized from our first assessment, we weren't measuring it, that there was something wrong with the assessment. So it's not just in teaching it, am I teaching it well? We realized we just had to redo the assessment.
Right.
And change it.
And I got an improvement. I gave a writing assignment, and I developed a rubric, and when I gave the rubric to the students, their writing went up dramatically, because then they understood, even though I had written instructions about what should be in your introduction, what should be in your whatever, but once they saw you will lose 7 points if these things are not in your introduction, all of a sudden those things became part of my introduction. And then I also added where they could give me a rough draft, and that helped a lot. So I noticed a big jump in their scores the next year after I gave them a rubric ahead of time, helped out that way. And so when I reassessed, it looked better. So this little thing is on dialogue. Oh, yes.
Well, I guess I'm jumping the gun here with the dialogue.
Oh, no, that's
I think that's one of the important benefits of dialoguing, because we did the same with an English course. English 121, we did an assessment, and we got some really good results, but then we realized we'd asked the wrong question about what we really needed to assess. And that came out of dialogue, and so now we're getting ready to dialogue more and then recreate or do an assessment that will really target what we really need to be zeroing in on.
And this is the hardest part, is setting aside time for dialogue. And I still think face-to-face for me is easier, but email if you can't. But to me, face-to-face dialogue, there's nothing like an actual dialogue with your peers. Okay. So at the course level, any instructors who are teaching the same course will be dialoguing, but also in between, like let's say you're the only person teaching a class, you have hopefully other instructors who are teaching other classes that could share and give some insight for you. And so you're trying to identify strengths and areas of improvement. So maybe two instructors could talk that are the same course, but also hopefully there's dialogue in between the courses, especially if the course, like Dan and I actually talk all the time because my students go to his class. And so I follow, are my students really getting this concept? And are they retaining it for the next year when they go and see his class? So there should be a dialogue in courses that align. Your students leave your course, go to the next course. Talking to those faculty to find out, are those students actually prepared for the next level they go to? And that's just one of those things that can really help improve the program. And then when you're doing at the program level, one thing is there might be some commonalities that everybody's finding that my students just can't write a sentence or whatever it is. You'll start seeing some common themes. And so you might be able to identify things that you could use that would help all of your faculty based on that assessment data. This is a great place to back up when you have when you're writing up your unit plan and you're asking for things. Saying, based on our assessment data, our students need help in such and such, and identifying ways that your department could help your students in that area and putting it into your unit plan, they're a really, really good place to document those needs by saying, based on assessment, that can really give you some good data on why you need certain things. And it may not even be monetary support. It could be also support in other ways other than just monetary. And so instructors are people teaching different courses and different programs. We talk a lot with math and we talk a lot with chemistry.
Oh, I just have a quick question because I don't know this, but is there a plan at some point to post for the entire school community all of the SLOs by course or by departments?
There are already, well, this is back with WebCMS, so CurricularNet should, whether or not it actually has it, but every course outline of record should have SLOs in them.
And at least for the vocational programs, the catalog has them listed.
Okay.
So I know when we go over to CurricularNet, things have been not as smooth about getting everything over in CurricularNet. So I'm not going to go out on a limb and say yes in CurricularNet, but WebCMS, there was a lot. And it's a lot. But talk to different programs, and it may not be a program that you think that you really align with to get some good information out of. One thing that surprised me, we were, I can't remember what, it was a Flex Day or some kind of training that I was doing, and I had a person from HealthOx sitting next to a person who taught dance, and surprisingly how similar their assessment methods were. Because one was doing a skills lab and they were assessing the student's skill. The other was a dance instructor who was assessing a dance performance. One big thing though, the dance performance, you don't fail someone because they can't dance. You know, their grade was based on participation, but you can do a critique and give them a non-graded critique that could help them improve their performance. And those two, when they were talking, had really similar assessment methods, and they were talking about the rubrics, and you wouldn't think that dance and HealthOx would be an obvious, overlap. So just because, you can think outside the box a little bit about what programs you might want to be discussing methods of assessment. And this is especially if you're a one-program person, you're just going to have to, and actually we have a two-program one person. Antonio is the only full-timer for two programs. So then you really just have to start dialoguing outside of your little office.
Dialogue with himself.
He can dialogue with himself. But he can come on over to chemistry, to biology, but even, there might be a match for him with another program. At least you're having another colleague talking about your data with you. We're all fairly intelligent people. We can't think outside the box. So if an English professor comes and talks to me, I teach writing in my biology. I do a rubric. We can talk to each other about it, even if we're not in the same program. We get a lot of really helpful.
And be sure you always document it. You guys know that, right? You write down, because that actually gets listed in the...
And in fact, Dan just gave me an email that he had sent and gave me a copy and stuck it in the binder. That binder can come in really handy to document discussions and just have a nice little section of documentation. If you do something and you don't document it, nobody really knows it happened. And then this is just like a quick little what we're going to be doing in the future. And I just want people to start thinking about it is how are you going to assess program level learning outcomes? There's a lot of ways to do it. Art and biology are doing it in two completely different ways. Art did it where their program level SLOs, they have a few program level SLOs, and their program and course level SLOs really align closely. And so they decided like one semester to do, every course is going to do a program level SLO 1. And there was just a really strong matchup. Biology, we have 12 program level SLOs. I'm not sure why we did that, but we were ambitious. And so different courses match up. So we might have one on communication. So a couple of the courses have writing assignments. There's another one maybe on structure versus function. And so a couple of the classes will have SLOs that deal with that. And so it's just really complicated making papers. But just as a program, start thinking about what do you want your assessment to really assess on a program level, and how can you best do that? So it's not going to be the same for everybody. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. So, those are thoughts. Is it meaningful? What do you want to find out about it? Collaborate, improve, have fun, and there we go. This is a great meeting place. They've got big tables. We don't have that in biology, a big table to sit around, and they have beer. Let's go. Okay. So more questions? One thing I kind of wanted to share is I went to a conference. I thought it'd be better to look at examples of assessment that weren't from Napa Valley College, because then if we wanted to critique them, we wouldn't have to worry about hurting anybody's feelings. So, for instance, I shouldn't even probably show what college this came from, but read this. This is on critical thinking. So this is actually asking people to assess how they feel they are at critical thinking. I often find myself questioning things I hear or read in this course to decide if I find them convincing. So it's totally judging. How am I as a critical thinker? So that, and this is actually this was actually for the whole community college, actually, for their college level critical thinking. So they gave the students this to self-assess how they're doing at critical thinking. So any thoughts about good, bad?
I do want to actually say that, because again, back to our critical listening one, we tried to assess that by having students sort of come up with their own critical assessment ideas about different speeches. We found we couldn't measure it. We couldn't figure out from that. So based on that, we ended up coming up with a quiz where we've taught types of fallacies and logic and things like that, and they just have to be able to identify specific ones. We just switched it around because we couldn't measure it by them. How much are you questioning it? Did this change your thinking? It's like there was no way to measure it. So this didn't tend to work.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, this to me does not seem. Maybe though, one thing is maybe there's different measures and they're using more than one. This might be how the students think they are at critical thinking, and hopefully they have a different objective one where they've actually tested it in another way and see if those align.
Well, also, maybe an assessment like this gets at more of the assumptions that instructors have about their students. So that, for example, you can do an objective thing, but when you ask them about things, what are you assuming to be true about what they're learning and what they should have dialed in by now? And that kind of thing can give you a lot of feedback so that you need to check your own assumptions and then redirect what you're doing in the course.
Yeah, it seems to be more getting at what the students think, not what they can do. What they think about themselves, their self-esteem possibly.
Well, just assumptions.
Yeah.
If I think they've got a certain unit and they don't, this might reveal that they don't, as opposed to just
Or that they think that they do.
They think they do. and then
they
you look
think
at the
they
grade.
do. Yeah,
And they don't know they don't.
Right, I was going to say that as well, in terms of sometimes they say, do you guys know the whatever? And they go, oh yeah, okay, let's have a quiz. And then they don't.
Yeah.
But these questions here are awfully leading.
They really are.
I mean, it's like, here's what we want you to say.
Please say it.
Please say it.
Very, very true, yes.
It's like, here's what you should be doing when you hear or read an assertion.
I have even a better one here too, actually.
Should have been a category.
This was also a survey, and again, this was on a college-wide one.
just have
And
a
this,
Not competent.
yeah, I mean, how many students really are going to say I'm not confident in writing a paper?
Yeah, don't tell me. Yeah, don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, this should be a category. What are you talking about?
Yeah, this would be the simplest, just how well have you learned this SLO?
Yeah.
We could just put
Yes.
that right in there.
No.
Yeah, whereas an actual writing assignment might actually get you a little bit better about being able to read it. But this was a campus-wide assessment on can their students.
You know, if the SLO was, students will be able to articulate their feelings on their own personal competence, this might assess that.
This is what the SLO, this is what the SLO.
As long as you're measuring it against an objective measure.
Yeah, no, it's actually students effectively communicate in written, spoken, or signed in artistic forms to diverse audiences. Students comprehend, respectfully respond to the ideas of others. And this is how they are assessing it. And I don't want to say good or bad. It's just that's their assessment method. And then we ask you to list 3 of the college experiences that contributed most to your communication and comprehensive skills. That's it. So I don't know if you're really going to get your answer that you're looking for, but you'll get self-esteem again. Students think that's right. So let's go move on to better ones then. Oh, actually, here's another. I got to actually show another cute one. This one was for a dance one. It was showing, I guess they wanted the students to be able to describe dance using a lot of descriptors. So before the class, they did a word, they had the students write down all the descriptors they can think of before the class. Oh, there we go. There we go. And so they had a wordle of what descriptions. And then after the class, they had a wordle with more descriptions.
What did this show? Their ability to find adjectives?
Their ability to find words to describe the stuff in the class. So if your SLO is that students will know lots of words that are associated with this would be a way
What's a
to
descriptive terminology?
Wordle. Yeah, you put them into a little program that will put out the. So there's probably better ways to do it. Here's an art program that I think probably you get better results if you have more specific objective questions. Like I didn't give you a piece of artwork, identify the medium of the chosen artwork, and no more than 3 or 4 sentences describe the artist's technique. That seems a little bit more
This must
objective.
be a math assessment.
It's actually not. Who was this? This was, possibly it is. It doesn't say. I don't know where I got this one from. And so, this one seems really.
You know, just to jump back to that world thing. Actually, if I understand, I didn't realize that all of a sudden that jars something in my thinking. I think that's the thing where it prints out, the more people say it, the bigger it is.
Exactly.
So that actually does give you some interesting information. Because
Yes.
the first one, all they thought about was choreography and music. It was like huge. The other ones are actually fairly even. That actually could give you.
Yeah, there's some information, and it doesn't mean this is the only way I hope they assess their students. But the students got more descriptions as they went on.
But it also shows that they were so focused at the beginning.
Yes, on music and choreography.
That was it.
Yeah.
And then now, and it's actually, and nothing, no, not really coming out of it.
No,
So
there's
it's
a
really
lot
out
of
of
So
it.
their awareness of other terms
also.
has increased. So we don't even know that they know the definitions of
No,
those
we do
terms.
not.
Well, that's true.
Just they are linked to something.
This is a little bit different topic, but something that's kind of gnawed on me about this and never had it answered particularly well, and that's the criteria that are used.
That's
Because I asked this last year, and there was someone threw out this 70% number. And, you know, what does that mean? If 70% is passing is different from saying 70% of your class can make this SLO. And somehow if they don't, you failed as a teacher. I'm being extreme, and I know the point of this is to improve your classes, and all the data is useful for that. But if you're setting certain numbers as success criteria, what about the instructor that does their SLOs and they get 80% on everything? Hey, I'm fine, I don't have to do anything. Meanwhile, in courses we teach where our students often don't make the SLOs, we're constantly finding ways to improve, and 5 years from now I could still have below 70% on one of my SLOs. That doesn't mean I'm not going to still keep improving, but I'm a little bit concerned about that quantitative criteria and how it's used.
Robin's got a really good answer for that. To put you on the spot, but your answer was really good.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a really good point, and there is certainly a level of subjectivity in it. I think that part of the point of the exercise is to have us all critically evaluate what our expectations are. I mean, if you set it low enough, if you set the bar low enough, you're always going to succeed. But then, how do you improve and that type of thing. And I think we have to ask ourselves, if I say 50% is my criterion, then is that really good enough? If only 50% of my students get the skill or whatever I'm covering, then am I really doing my job? I guess is what I would ask. But I think that part of on the non-instructional side, we really use that to kind of anticipate what the results might be and really get ourselves thinking in the framework of what do I really expect and what is good enough in terms of the service that I'm delivering. But I think that, again, when you look at the cycle of improvement, the point is improvement. And so it's not just checking a box that the criteria were met and I'm done and I did a good job and pat myself on the back. It's really, how are you going to use it and move forward? And one thing that we use for a baseline, which might be where some of the 70% were coming from, is the successful course completion rate. And it's not a perfect alignment in the, as you mentioned, it's grades. It's not based on this one aspect of the SLO. But it gives you a sense of what historically students have done in your class in terms of their grades and their successful course completion rates.
That's across.
No, for your class. You would look at your classes.
Yeah, so look at like biology 105. I'm not sure if that's what you teach or not, but biology 105, if the successful course completion rate over the last 5 years has been about 83%, well, then that gives you a target for where, what you might expect in terms of the SLO. And usually the SLO is, a small portion of what you cover in the class. But it's a place to start and getting toward that improvement. But I think the big thing is to get away from, oh, I succeeded, I'm done.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I'm so and if you set it too low, then it's really meaningless.
And then one thing also, just to kind of think about also, is if you're only assessing at the final, you're assessing the students that made it through to the final. And in Bio 105, for instance, not all my students make it from the first day to the last day. So that chunk I haven't captured in my final results. And it's something to think about and keep in mind that maybe my, 70% of my students got it, but that 70% made it to the final. How about those 40% of students who never made it to the final?
Yeah. And along those lines, the successful course completion rate includes students that were enrolled as of census day. So if you took the fourth week and then assess that population, whether they complete the assessment or not.
Right.
But you can also change that number. It doesn't have to be.
Right,
It's
right.
kind
Yeah.
of our
See
weird
that
C
70%.
level thinking that we have.
Yeah.
But it also depends on what SLO you're assessing.
Yes.
So if you're assessing a program level SLO in your entry level class, because it kind of builds, the next class builds on the next class builds on it. Your level maybe, I expect my student in my entry level class to have like a 20% success rate because you haven't had the other classes to now meet this program level SLO. Because if they were all 100% at the program level in your intro class, then you'd have to ask yourself, why do you have any other classes?
But another way to look at that would be to have a separate rubric for each level.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you won't be able
So
to
you're going to be
spend
at this part on this rubric in this class and this part. Or you could just not panic when it's a 30% success rate, because that's what you'd expect from an intro student.
And some classes, actually there was a welding instructor who had, his criteria was 100% for one of his SLOs because it was a safety SLO.
Yes.
And he said the students could not go past a certain point unless they were safe. And so it was 100%. He goes, I know I don't want anybody in my welding class who was not safe. And same thing like for nursing, for like say dosage. I'd like that to be 100%. This is my personal thing.
It was like correct medicine.
Yeah, I would like that to be really, really high. Okay, how are we going to time? I just got okay. Do you guys like looking at more little examples? I think it's kind of fun to see what other people are doing.
And just know that
They're not ours, but this one is chemistry. And this one was doing about, was talking about scientific method if your students can have more specific questions on what is the scientific method.
Hey, on that bottom part where it says briefly answer, are they choosing one bubble or are they writing a response? Briefly answer or fill it in?
This looks like fill in here. I wonder if there might be a
It does, but-
there we go. There's also there's some brief ones on the other side. So I think this one is bubble test and the other side is.
But how do you briefly answer with a bubble?
Oh, it
Draw a
does.
small bubble?
Yeah, it does.
It's like a teacher's rating.
I think this one on the side, the teacher's rating. The other ones I think really are bubble, where you say the following scenario, which the scientific method is being illustrated, and you would just bubble in that one. But on this one, the teacher's grade on a rubric explain the parts of an atom. This is in my,
Oh, and then the rubrics on the right.
yeah, content, 0 through 4. So,
Do they have a little class in SLO for understanding the form?
well, I'm hoping the teachers already understand the form, but it's not mine. But it's kind of, but one of the things that was kind of cool was being able to use, like, through it, or something about being able to understand the glassware. So you had to draw the beaker, graduated cylinder, in the Limmeyer class. That's kind of interesting.
That is cool.
One of those kind of cool assessments. And draw the setup required to boil water in the laboratory, which is not, by the way, an oven and a pot. So it'll be a different one. And label all the pieces of equipment. That's it, kind of, and oh, this is actually a really good one. Draw the setup required to do a titration and label all of the equipment. That's kind of cool. Because you're always thinking, how can I really assess if my students can actually do the, without actually, some of these assessments are not easy. There was a biology one, but a really similar one where they were doing some ones for scientific method, and can you understand charts and things.
And is that the one where they asked which of these could you test scientifically?
Yeah,
That's a good example. I
That's
thought
really cool.
applied logic, I mean, applied critical thinking skills.
Yeah, yeah, so,
Well, it seems pretty
obvious. I'm hoping it's pretty obvious.
But you know, I have a feeling for many students it's not.
Oh, please don't say
I
that.
want us to at least at the start, until they learn.
I want us to do which animals have souls.
Yes, let's test that.
It's easy, you weigh them before and after dinner.
It's which flowers is pretty. So there's a lot of assessment methods, and part of it really is what you want to get out of the assessment. And so,
Check the other
any questions or things that you guys have been struggling with? Other than time, we all have that.
Stephanie, can we make our best guess if we weren't keeping minutes in
Yes.
previous discussions?
I'm the worst at keeping any kind of documentation of discussions. So what you can do is kind of backtrack and just your best recollections, just try to summarize what happened at a meeting.
I think it's say, spring.
Spring of, in 2010, we discussed this. It doesn't have to be, So other,
All right.
a couple things, there's a sign-in sheet, so you want to get, credit for being here. And there's brownies, and there is an evaluation form over here, so you can give feedback on today. So sign in, evaluation form, brownies. Most important things.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you guys for coming.